All right, so finally, detailing or creating surface details. I already mentioned that you could use the Damien standard brush to create little surface details. But one of the ones that I haven't covered yet, which I will, is creating stamps. So stamps are really good for repetitive surface details, like little insertions and stuff like, or inserts and stuff, areas that kind of add meshes of something real or something that has actual mechanical parts without having to waste too much time in messing around with it or creating each of these individually. So I'll go ahead and just smooth this out a little bit just so it makes it easier to see. All right, so we can go ahead and go into our brush, and you can see I already have quite a bit of these already created. I'll just kind of go over a few of them, and then I'll go over how to make one. So you can see we can just have these little details everywhere. They can really go anywhere. I wouldn't recommend using these too much because if you just use them all over like I'm doing right now, the mesh gets kind of noisy, which is fine for this example, but I would be very careful with using just too many of them because it'll confuse the viewer as to where to look at the mesh if you have too many details. So we can use all these kinds of things to get really cool effects. Alright, so how do we create one of these? It's quite simple. First of all, we want to make sure perspective is off. We want to go into our document and change the size to maybe 500 by 500. And we can go ahead and resize. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to grab a plane, which is a standard plane. So we're going to go ahead and go to our plane, try to find it in here. There we go, plane, 3D. Okay, so we'll draw that on the canvas and make it editable. So we'll go ahead and make it a polymesh 3D. And now what we want to do is we want to come down to geometry and turn off smooth. So we'll turn this off, and so when we subdivide it, you can see it retains its corners, which is something we really want. Alright, so now that we have the mesh, I'm going to go ahead and turn on perspective for just a moment so I can see this better. So divide that a few times, and then we can go up into our stroke palette, or excuse me, transform palette, activate symmetry, activate it on the z-axis, and activate radial symmetry. And we can go ahead and turn that up to as many as you need, but you should never use more than you actually need. And so what we can do right here is we can just select the standard brush, and we can start making little details. I'll just make an example of one that I've made before that's quite easy to make. So we'll go ahead and cut a hole in here. Use the hard polish brush to kind of smooth that out a bit. And then we can go and use the trim hole brush and turn down the number of radial symmetries used. Cut a little hole in there. Use the Damien standard brush, and we'll go ahead and turn up the radial count a bit more. And we'll go ahead and make a little cut right there. And then we can use the pinch brush to kind of pull that together a bit. Okay, so now that we have this, what do we do with it? First of all, we want to go ahead and, since this is all negative, it'll be easier to flip it to grab our displacement map. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and go to display properties, and we'll just click double in case you wanted to do both. So you can see both sides of it. I'm going to smooth that a bit. Okay, so now that we have this, what do we want to do? We want to frame it. We want to zoom in to about where the detail ends, so to about there. And then we go into alpha, and we click grab dock. And you see now I have an alpha right here that we will use to make our brush, our new brush. So to make the new brush, first of all, let's go ahead and come back to our sphere, just so we can test the brush. So we have this alpha, and we want to go to our standard brush and select the alpha. And you can see when we start to do it, it just draws the alpha a bunch of times. So that's kind of a problem. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to come up into dots and change the stroke type to drag dot. And so now we're dragging around this little detail, but it's all wrong. You can see it's still showing in the positive the way we made it. And what we want to do is we want to show it in the negative. So we're going to come into the brush palette, and we're going to change Z add to Z sub. So now when we push it in, it's negative. And now what we want to do is we want to edit a bit of this. So I open this, but I don't really need it yet. What I want to do is up the intensity. Here we go. Now it's looking a bit more like it. I'm going to turn off lazy mouse because we don't really need it. And we just need to play with the intensity, and you can see it's still not quite intense enough. So we're going to turn up the intensity a bit more. And that seems about good. That seems about like the surface detail we want. So now that we have this, what can we do with it? There's one more thing I'd like to change, and that is the focal shift. I'm going to minimize the focal shift a little bit. So the brush is the brush that the brush mimics the alpha that we have most. All right. So I'll turn down the intensity just a little bit. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now once you have this brush and you like what you have, you can go ahead and save the brush out by coming up here and save the brush as. Save this as Eat 3D Mech Stamp 001. And now every time you load ZBrush, it will load along with it. And you can use the Damien standard brush to kind of connect these areas. The possibilities are endless. Alright, and that pretty much covers all the basics of hard surface sculpting, so we can go ahead and get into the real character.